Okay, so now we're moving on. We've discussed the sort of six wheels and the buses, and now we're moving on to two wheels or two legs. And we have the chairman of the Hong Kong Cycling Alliance to kick off with some ideas about cycling and why not Hong Kong. So let me just transition to this. There we go. This is Martin. Welcome.
Hi everybody. Martin Turner from Hong Kong Cycling Alliance. We're a campaigning organisation. We try to make a lot of noise. We try to point people to look at the possibilities for cycling to serve Hong Kong better. It's about how cycling can be a part of the transport network, the transport system, as well as sport and leisure and so on. But transport's a focus. I often spend a lot of time trying to persuade people what a wonderful solution cycling is. A lot of concerns are raised, and the same concerns are raised, and I have simple answers for them. But I've got a different proposition today, and that's that the government, as well as academics else in Hong Kong, but particularly the government, haven't done the basic research, the basic data gathering to provide a platform for a realistic consideration of what cycling can do for Hong Kong as part of the transport mix. We should, I believe, investigate and experiment with what cycling can do. And I'm welcoming anybody who can tell me why we shouldn't look, why when the rest of the world over the last 15 to 20 years has taken up cycling, integrated it, experimented a lot in China, in Singapore, Taiwan, our neighbours, Europe, the US, South America. All of them have, in lots and lots of different ways, found a role for cycling and developed it. Part of it's top-down, part of it is people with their own initiatives and individually getting on a bike and riding it. It's not complicated. In the last 8 months or so, we've had an extra rush as cities especially, but countries too, have taken up cycling as part of social distancing, allocating entire lanes to cyclists which weren't there before, as well as, of course, enabling more social distancing for pedestrians and other street use. There are low traffic neighbourhoods in London. There's cyclovia in car-free days in Bogota. There's a new cycle lane laid down the main congested artery through Manila. These aren't places that have a tradition of cycling. Paris has taken up under the new mayor cycling and walking. Again, Paris didn't have the kind of cycling tradition that people associate with Copenhagen and Amsterdam. And those places didn't have a cycling tradition before the 1970s, which is the sort of nadir of all this. So where are we? What's our starting position for Hong Kong? In fact, there's a lot of cycling in Hong Kong. A lot of people ride bikes. And some of it's for leisure, some of it's for transport. We don't really know quite what the split is. Transport Department will have us believe, and have done for many years, that cycling is basically for leisure. For a long time, there was no consideration of, or no recognition of transport. Even now, with all due respect to our Transport Department friends here today with us, I don't experience when I meet people there's any real taking on board of what cycling does as part of the transport system. It's mentioned as something that happens in the new towns on the cycle tracks. So Transport Department is the key to all this, because other departments follow them in terms of how cycling is approached. There's lots of cycling in Hong Kong. You can go out, you can see it, you can look at government data and say, oh yes, parts of the new territories, rural areas have 30-40% modal share for cycling. And then there are all those cycle tracks in the new towns. In the urban areas, people ride bikes. All those chickens and gas canisters that get delivered are by people riding bikes. They're not supermen or women. They are just people who know that you can get on a bike and get around. So there is cycling in Hong Kong, and we shouldn't overlook the fact that we're already there. This isn't an idea for the future. The policy for cycling is definitely unsupportive. It's about not supporting cycling in the urban areas, not actually doing anything for cycling on roads. It's seen as a leisure activity on the cycle tracks. That's got to change. I would just like to sidetrack slightly and give myself as an example. There are many people who currently ride a lot in the urban areas to get around, and it really works. It's simple, it's fast, it's effective. You reduce the number of journeys you make, you get to where you want to be. There's a certainty. Isochrones are circular because you just go where you want to go, and there's no allowance for traffic jams other than the basic built-in. It's about 20% for traffic lights and so on over a clear run. Resilience, yep, no problem. There's a hold up, the road's closed, you can go a different way. And so, although cycling right now is not for everyone, and that's the point of Hong Kong Cycling Alliance, we're trying to make it available for a much wider audience. The proof of concept is there. Cycling gets around. If I'm wanting to get over to North Wan Chai across Gloucester Road, I have to break the law to cross one of the bridges there because there are no legal links, but the roads work. The network of roads that's established and is so much in the way of being a pedestrian, cramping pedestrians behind railings onto these narrow rat runs we call pavements. On a bicycle, you get the benefit of the small mobile vehicle and the network of roads that gets you quickly anywhere. So we've got to take that proof of concept and make it work for much larger numbers of people and integrate it into how we get around. That's what my organisation is trying to do. I get back to my main point. Why aren't we doing the research? Why isn't there experimentation? Perhaps I should be doing it with my group, but the government should be doing it. Let's have a couple down here. No. Okay. So we're already popular, and this is perhaps the way that Transport Department sees cyclists. It's certainly, this is from one of their leaflets, and it's how it comes across when I deal with Transport Department officials. They think of cyclists as beginners, wobbly, incompetent, thoughtless, can't make a decision on, for instance, whether they can cope with a particular slope or not. Hence, advocacy from Transport Department to ban cyclists from this slope or that road. Is this our government's cycling policy? There is a severe problem of the government taking 10,000 to 20,000 bikes a year from where they're parked and destroying them. It seems to breach reasonableness and the basic law, but that's what happens. If your vehicle is parked somewhere where one of the government departments who are involved, there are 4 or 5, they will take the bike and just either sell it for scrap or crunch it up on the spot. It doesn't happen to a car owner. And there is, of course, in the parking regulations, the freedom for a bicycle owner to park their bike anywhere that's not causing danger or actual obstruction. Again, another issue, the government will prosecute you or threaten or remove the bike under a different law, such as the Occupation of Government Lands Ordinance. A lot of this comes down to space. So the issues that we're discussing here today of how we make use of the limited urban space we have are used against cycling. there's a reaction that, oh, there isn't enough space for bikes, and sometimes that means people are envisaging hard infrastructure of segregated cycleways. Sometimes there's just a thought about the physical space of the bike itself. There's an underlying assumption there that somehow people who are getting around on bikes are an addition to the transport mix and not substituting for other modes, whether that's motor vehicles or public transport. And then there are many other factors as well, such as the reduced number of journeys you need to make. If you're on a bike, you can stop off at this shop, the library, see a friend, all in one journey, and you don't have to go out at the weekend after your MTR journey home to go and buy whatever it was you have to from that other shop. So there are many ways in which cycling can... Oh, interesting. Many ways in which cycling can take us forward in the transport sphere.
Okay.
So the data that we have is very, very limited. Again, Transport Department are at the heart of this, and we see we don't know how many bikes there are. You know, the number of bikes in Hong Kong is an open question, and I get asked this, and I can't give a straight answer. Every 10 years, the Travel Characteristics Survey says how many households have bikes available, but the data is unreliable because it comes from a very broad household survey of people who rode a bike in the last 3 months. The annual studies by the Transport Department have no mention of cycling at all. The traffic census. The data that we want might be, for instance, how much more cycling there is at particular locations over a period of time. So this looks like a good graph, but it's from New York. What I'd like to note here is that New York City was gathering the data of how much cycling was taking place 20 years before the upsurge in cycling participation from 1980. Why aren't we doing the same thing? I guess that's probably a good place to end.
Okay. All right, thank you, Martin. And we can have more. Actually, we had a quick question from Alok: is why are bikes not allowed to be carried on buses?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, bikes can be carried on the MTR, on all services. This was announced informally at a meeting with MTR and bike organisations, cycling organisations, but it's never been published or explained clearly. And then there's this added expectation, again, not written down, that somehow a wheel should be removed for reasons that are never clear. Buses, we get stuck with a variation of the 0.1 cubic meters general baggage rule. So basically, if you've got a bike that is less than 0.1 cubic meters, then they're not going to object, but why should they? Because it's already meeting the baggage requirements, and that would be a Brompton, by the way, the only bike available that meets the requirement.
Okay. We now have Justin Yim, who's the founder of Hong Kong Street Reset, and is actually in the UK working for Phil Jones and Associates. And hi, Justin, can you hear us?
Hi.
And you're going to make a brief presentation, I understand.
Yes. Let me share my screen.
Yeah.
Can you hear me well? Does it have echoes and? Yep. So today I would be talking about urban cycling infrastructure. I'll start off with the mindset behind planning of cycle infrastructure and run through some key interventions that we can do to our roads to make cycling safer and more attractive. So before to start with that, we should talk about the space inefficiency of cars, obviously. So a moving car takes about 28 times more space than moving bicycle, and 10 times more than a parked bicycle. So this is from the Netherlands Institute of Transport Policy Analysis in 2018. it shows that why cycling could be something that we should really consider, especially in a dense environment with insufficient road space, because it's a more efficient mode of transport than private car. So in the UK, where I'm based now, has been stepping up on cycling after years of realizing this immense socioeconomic and health benefit of it. The key mindset of it is we should treat cycling as truly like vehicles. They deserve direct and joined up routes. Points requiring cyclists to dismount should be avoided, and cycling infrastructure should be designed only by those who have experience on the road as cyclists. It's the network, but not just the links on the left-hand side, that we should think about. A true interconnected network should have about 400 meters safe cyclable links within every 1 square kilometer space in a street network. And there are 5 core principles in designing a good, usable, attractive network for cycling. It should be coherent. Cyclists should be able to start and end their journeys with a high quality route that is consistent and easy to navigate. And by safe, we're talking about cycle network that not only improve their actual safety, but also their feeling of how safe the environment is. So notably, you can see on the direct column of this diagram, there's a don't section talk about this track requires cyclists to give way on each side road. And if the route requires many stopping and starting, it will result in some cyclists just choosing to ride on the main carriageway instead of a safer track, which is exactly what's happening in Hong Kong. So it's about prioritizing sustainable modes over cars, over the less safe space efficient private vehicles. On the left-hand side, we can see New York City, which cycling is a solution rather than a problem in a dense, similarly dense, high density built environment. And on the right-hand side, we can see London, which have been learning from Dutch and Nordic countries and have been producing planning and design guidances that works with the British road design. And Hong Kong embodying the unique things from both, we might be able to benefit from a hybrid model mixing the two. The failure of providing a safe cycling infrastructure has cost us the lives of 46 cyclists during the year of 2017 and 2013 and 17. And according to research, because more than 80% of them died on the carriageway without physical separation. Urban cycling is unsafe in Hong Kong, mostly only because of lack of infrastructure. And how do we make it safe? This hierarchy of control diagram was originated from the field of occupational health and safety. It explains cycling safety approach in Hong Kong very well. We are stuck at the control of process, focusing merely on the education and enforcement against cyclists in urban areas. We're not retrofitting urban roads to provide and improve cycling conditions using the engineering approach, which is above that, which is more effective than the other. It's the engineering approach that we need the most to truly protect cyclists. So in the UK, we have seen the completion of the first protected signalized junction in Manchester and the first Dutch-style roundabout in Cambridge. Both of them are designed to minimize conflicts between cyclists and vehicles at junctions, separating them mainly through the delineation of space. But separation not only works with space, but also time. Here it shows animation of an early release signal for cyclists in London. Cyclists are given a head start for about 4 seconds, which are proven to minimize collision risk at junctions, especially for those who are turning left. However, certainly not all routes could be covered in the foreseeable future with major high quality segregated cycle lanes. So we should also try to provide a relatively safe and cyclable connections between the major routes. According to WHO research, pedestrians are shown to have 90% of survival if they are struck by a car at 30 km/h speed. However, this chance of survival reduces to only about 30% when they are struck by a car at the speed of 50 km/h, which is the current default speed limit in urban areas and rural areas, even in Hong Kong. This fatality risk applies similarly to cyclists. Therefore, 30 km/h speed limit should be set as the norm on urban streets. This will not only protect cyclists, but also more for pedestrians even. And 42% of London's road network have now been enacting this 30 km/h speed limit. And the low speed environment could be achieved through these kind of changes to the road layout, such as narrowing the carriageway, adding speed tables, and tightening corner radii. But ultimately, we could also explore the concept of filtered permeability. On one hand, to protect cyclists by providing a low traffic streets environment, but also to minimize and reduces the convenience of motor vehicles to truly make our streets human first rather than vehicle first. So the gist of it is to discourage through motor traffic. And here it shows the Barcelona superblock model, which uses the same concept. It restricts the through traffic just outside of this superblock and create a low traffic speed, low traffic and low speed road network as just of local access only for the motor traffic. So you can see there are 10 km/h speed limit, and they are diverted with their routes. They can only do a U-turn, or there will be mostly one-way streets in this network to try to minimize through traffic going through the area to provide a safer and also is this place-making opportunity for people walking and cycling. This could be achieved by bus and cycle only roads with these timed bus gates, and also modal filters that only allow non-motorized mode to go through within the main roads. So after all, there will be only more and more people uptaking cycling in the urban areas of Hong Kong with the completion of the cycle network in Kai Tak and West Kowloon, or even the Anderson Road ex-quarry site development in East Kowloon. It would be irresponsible as Transport Authority to just dump these vulnerable road users to the carriageway without providing any assistance in terms of infrastructure, as people cycling would, after all, wanting to start and end their journeys nearby. And to the right-hand corner, we can see the Central Kowloon route. It's due to complete by 2025, although we don't know whether it will be extended. It will take a lot of traffic away from the surface streets. Perhaps that will be the time that we can demand for, or we can prepare for that time to demand for high quality cycle infrastructure in Kowloon, or even across the urban area of Hong Kong. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Justin. And I'm going to, there we are.
I'm going to stop sharing.
There we are. Okay, we're back. Okay, we just have a short presentation now on behalf of Pedal Me in London. That's a delivery company using cargo bikes, and it's a great company. Their management are actually out on bikes delivering. They don't have time for these fancy Zoom seminars, so they asked me to present their latest story, which is quite, oh, hang on, I've lost it. Hang on. There we go. Yeah. Which is a great story. in March 2000, in March this year, as UK entered lockdown, Lambeth Council decided to partner with PedalMe to assist with the delivery of thousands of care packages. This was essential home products and food to individuals and families most in need. This was the single largest cargo bike logistics operation in the UK. And you can see from this map here on the left, these were the actual deliveries over one day. PedalMe covered 20,000 kilometres over a month and a half to deliver nearly 10,000 packages, and that was 150,000 kilograms of food and supplies across Lambeth. So this was a great project. It showed that cargo bikes can really be an alternative to vans and to sort of heavy trucks. It kept the streets cleaner in terms of emissions. It kept the streets safer because large vehicles, as we know, are the most dangerous anywhere in the world. And it saved around 5 tons of CO2, just that one project alone. So it's really a great solution. It's something we need to be promoting in Hong Kong. So I just wanted to share that news from London. Now, what we're going to do now is have a discussion with Martin and I believe Justin and Oren, if Oren is around.
Yes, I am.
Yes, he is. There we are. Okay, let's add you to the spotlight, and we'll add Justin. So all of, yeah, let's see. Okay. So I mean, there's some great points been made already, but Oren, I believe you have a sort of slightly different view of cycling as you've put forward in recent events. Perhaps you could just quickly give your position.
Okay, well, I mean, I'll try to do it quickly, but I'm speaking after at least 20 minutes of very persuasive arguments in favor of cycling, so I may need a little more than a few seconds. So anyway, let me start by saying something very simple. Often the advocates for cycling, I think correctly, pitch it against motor vehicles. I have nothing against saying that bikes should be given priority over motor vehicles. By the way, it's very echoey. I don't know, James, it's again something that you're in.
Sounds good here.
Yeah.
It sounds very good here for us.
It's okay. I just hear myself.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, so for me, the issue is very simply about in a dense urban environment where we have lots of people and very limited space. If we are redistributing space away from motor vehicles, where does that space go? And the space issue with bikes is not just about lanes or carriages. It's also bike parking. Let's remember that. And I have pictures. I don't want to waste time now, but sharing my screen again. But bike parking is not a small thing. If you look at various European cities where biking is very popular, they have massive facilities for bike parking. So when we talk about the space requirements of bikes, it's not just lanes. It's also where you can leave your bike when you so efficiently run those errands and bike through the urban areas. And I've yet to hear a compelling solution to that problem, because the reality is, including in all those European cities where there is a cycling culture, is that people like, the whole point about biking is that is a convenience. And the convenience means you cannot like park your bike at the place, or very convenient, very close to the place you're going to, then in some ways it defeats the whole purpose. And so you see those vast fields of bikes parked where, you know what, I will share the screen because I do think it's important to see it. I just, let me just share it. Can you see the,
Yeah.
Can you see my screen? So you have these great facilities in Amsterdam and elsewhere, you know, where you know, they were designed for bike parking and it's amazing. But you also see a lot of this. And this is something you can afford in a city that has wide sidewalks, that have space for people, for cafes, and also for kind of messy bike parking, because the density is such and the road space and the pedestrian space is such that you can afford to do that. This is in Berlin. I mean, this is something you see in many places in Europe. And I just don't see how we fit that in the urban areas of Hong Kong. I just don't. So now we can talk about converting car parks into bike parking. And I'm sure there are things that can be done. But I just want the conversation to be not just about carriageway space, but also about bike parking. So I think it's very, very important. Now, to Justin's point, I think he touched on a very important thing, which is bike biking is not just about one street having a bike lane. It's about a network that needs to be dense enough and have enough reach into the urban areas. By the way, I'm only talking about dense urban areas. I'm leaving out all the places that already have significant use of biking and certainly potential for a lot more. So let's talk about the urban areas. So to find a solution, to find a lane, to find even bike parking here and there is never going to be enough, because unless you have a consistent, continuous network that allows someone to get on a bike and expect to reach basically every corner of the urban area because you have a bike lane every 500 meters or whatever it is, without that, the whole usefulness of it is, I think, in question. So the research, the investigation that Martin is talking about, and with the kind of solutions that Justin is talking about, need to really address that, whether that is feasible. Because, and this is where I'm going to conclude, the point is, Justin, you said about New York, how biking is now a solution. And we have to be very precise about that. In New York City, especially in Manhattan, biking is a solution for a tiny group of people who use bikes. And they gained incredible infrastructure over the years of Michael Bloomberg and Jeanette Sadiq-Khan, who did an amazing job apportioning space for bikes out of carriageway correctly. But the majority of people in New York, in Manhattan, still are pedestrians who use mass transit to get to the place from which to start their pedestrian journey. So let's remember that. And when we talk about biking, it's a great solution, but it's a niche solution in dense urban areas. And I do think that the backbone in dense urban area mobility in Hong Kong is still public transport and pedestrian space. That should be the beginning of any solution. So the problem we see even in this picture here is a problem that needs to be solved, first of all, for pedestrians, to bring them from the bus stop, from the MTR station to where they're going. And then if we have a spare space, and that spare space has enough space for bike lanes and for bike parking in a way that doesn't compromise that backbone of mass transit and pedestrian space, I welcome biking wherever it's possible. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Very good. So perhaps, I don't know, shall I just give Martin
Sure.
a very brief, and then Justin a very brief response? Okay.
Aaron, thanks for that. Very, very nicely put, careful and thoughtful, and raising a lot of valid points. In a way, saying the same as myself. That we need to look at things. I just have a greater expectation of finding positive solutions, but to my earlier point, I don't see any reason for not looking and researching. I would just raise one kind of point of a quibble. Let's just say, I see a huge multiplicity of routes forward, the kinds of people who are riding early, the take-up, the process, the areas. I don't see any reason why we have to have a complete network when, if certain routes and certain smaller areas are made well suited to cycling, or people find it appropriate. Sha Tin Schools network. I don't understand why there are school runs with motor cars in Sha Tin when every kid could jump on a bike and go to school. So just to home in on your points, Aaron, you raised two which I see as slightly in conflict. One is that it's a niche solution. Cycling is a niche solution for a very tiny number of people. And you also highlighted the major car parking facilities in Amsterdam, which are representing two very different scenarios. In Amsterdam, you got kind of 60% cycling modal share, and if it's a niche solution, then you don't need that huge parking. Or if you have a very small number of people, then you don't. You can see what I mean.
Okay.
Doesn't
so let me just briefly correct to clarify. I meant it's a niche solution. I think it can only be a niche solution in places like Manhattan or Hong Kong. Amsterdam is a different story. I'm not saying it's a niche solution there at all.
Right. So we don't need the mass. The parking problem is much more easily solvable and doesn't require huge infrastructure. As you mentioned, I mean, as again, you raised other good points. The car parking, either in building or on the street, offers great opportunities because, as Justin very cautiously suggested, that a bike takes up 1/10 of the space of a parked car. I've seen 17 as another figure, and I do believe that there is a path forward to parking using repurposed car parking space. There's so much of it around, and we all know that the growth in car ownership is excessive, and perhaps this is one way to reverse it, to start making good use of that space.
Justin, do you have any comments here?
Yes. So first of all, I agree with what Oren said, that public transport is definitely the backbone of Hong Kong's transport network. No disagreement about that. And I really agree that we should prioritize public transport over everything else. To be honest, especially vehicles. So in terms of vehicles, private vehicles that we should be taking space away from, cycling offers that autonomy of transport similar to private vehicles in the dense urban area context that is a short journeys within 5 kilometers. So I can see the potential of that being a first or last mile connections to and from MTR stations, especially that now as pedestrians or public transport users, normally if I live quite far from an MTR station, I would use minibuses or buses to actually get around from my home to the nearest mass transit station. But would cycling be something that is feasible, that offers people with autonomy and weight-free alternative to public transport, that they could actually get to and from their destination quicker and easier, provided that there are safe infrastructure provided to complement public transport? That's one thing. And another thing is, again, a car parking space can actually fit 8 bicycles. If we agree that there should be we should abolish a vehicle first policy, could some parking be retrofitted to bikes, especially that you can say that I agree in London and Manhattan, to a niche road that not many people, in terms of wider context, in percentage-wise, that actually uptake cycling. So in the short-term period, would these retrofit of current car parking spaces be good enough to actually provide cycle parking spaces around and where people would be? In the long term, if cycling really gain as a critical mass, actually uptake cycling, that would be something that we can consider later. But in a short-term period of time, would cycling parking would just be sufficient to be provided by retrofitting car parking spaces? Yeah, that's the point that I would.
Yeah, Oren, that's a good point. I mean, if you around Bonham Road, where you've done the isochrome studies, a lot of those buildings there have car parks. They're not really visible, but our building where I live has a space for around 150 cars out of 300 apartments, and no one's allowed to park a bike anywhere in that sort of multi-story car park. So, I mean, isn't there a potential solution there?
I'll tell you, yes, there is, and actually I mentioned it myself. I said I think it should be studied. I have nothing. That's where I agree completely with Martin. I think that it is something that needs to be looked at seriously and with an eye to, improve things and provide a better cycling infrastructure. I'll tell you just a tiny anecdote, which is where I started thinking of this problem. Some years ago, I had a meeting in an office building in Manhattan, um, and someone, uh, it was the morning, like 9 a.m. Someone walked into the lift with his bike because there was no place to park it outside, or because he felt it wasn't safe to park it outside. And he, I have to say that it was combined with a bit of an attitude about like, I'm here with my bike, make room, and all of us have to squeeze so that he could take his bike to his office. And I was thinking, okay, how is that scalable? What if everybody thinks it's their right to bike to work because biking is so virtuous, and as we're being told? And so I think Bonham Road is one thing, but I'm thinking of Shangwon, where I work. Most buildings don't have car parks. I mean, there's actually very few car parks in Shangwon. You can repurpose all of them, which would be difficult, completely to bike parking, and still you wouldn't have enough capacity to make that a significant mode of transport serving people who want to work in Shangwon. That's my point. I'm not saying that there is no room for more biking in the urban areas, but I just think the scalability of it is what troubles me. And of course, where it begins to brush against the space available for pedestrians, which is constrained to begin with.
Yeah, yeah, which is a huge problem in Shangwan as well. So, Martin, did you want to?
Yeah, just a couple of throwouts to respond. I always tell people who, like your friend in the lift there, who perhaps has a flashy bike, he doesn't want to leave it outside because he's an important person who wears lycra perhaps and is cycling around. Use a bike that you're not afraid to lose, and it becomes 10 times more valuable. If you've got it doesn't have to be an old banger. A cheapish bike can go very smoothly, and yet you know that if once a year or once in 2 years it goes, you get another one, and you're already well ahead of the game. The other option in terms of parking in Sheungwan area, the public bikes, the share bikes that came to Hong Kong. They've died down a little. Hopefully, they will still thrive. If each bike is being used 4 or 6 times a day, then the cost to society of parking it becomes that much less.
I agree in principle. It's about how it all adds up and how the numbers work. By the way, I want to respond to Alok's quick comment about taking your bike on the bus. Well, I mean, to the extent that you meant to say that buses in Hong Kong are, riding well below capacity, point taken. But I think that in general, the idea of taking bikes on mass transit, especially during peak hour, I mean, needless to say, that's a very problematic idea. The space conflicts are obvious. And I'm reminded of I think it was maybe someone, maybe it was Andy Byford who was leading the MTA in New York, who said that something about why isn't the MTA's policy on taking a bike on the subway? And he said it's a law of deterrence. Again, I'm paraphrasing. Meaning, if you think you can take your bike on the subway without getting really nasty looks and comments, go ahead. And he said that works pretty well. No one would dare do it during rush hour. But if people want to do it during the slow hours, go ahead, and no one will say anything. I think it's a pretty good approach to that problem.
On the buses, I mean, we see in the US that a lot of buses have these forks on the front, and you can take 3 or 4 bikes. I mean, this would be a help for cyclists who.
I have to say, if I was on that bus trying to get somewhere, and you had to wait for 2 minutes and someone tied their bike to the front, I'm not sure I'd be a very happy mass transit rider.
They're very quick, 20 seconds.
They can be very quick. Yeah, I've seen them done very quick, but
average.
Yeah. Because in Hong Kong, it's very hard to get your bike from one. I think it's what you talked about, Justin, as well, is about the network. It's very hard to get from Hong Kong Island to the other side, to Kowloon on a bike. You probably have to take a ferry or go on the MTR and face the angry stairs, as Oren's talking about, or take your wheel off, or take a van. So really, to get a bike off the island is quite problematic. And if you could just stick it on the front of a cross harbour bus, then that might be a small solution. But yeah, Justin, do you have any comments on what we just discussed?
About parking, I just want to add one more thing that in terms of, we know that we talked about parking minimums, and London has, for the last 10 years, already seized the parking minimum, and they provide a parking minimum just for cycling, just for cycles, but not private vehicles. And that would be one of the way involved, not saying right now, but in the future, if we really want to prioritize sustainable modes and try to minimize people's willingness to drive to work, that would be one of the things that we consider, especially to provide cycle parking rather than actual car parking in no matter residential or commercial development. That could be something that we could also look into in the future.
Okay. Oren, would you like to say anything?
No, I think it's a very interesting discussion.
It is. It's very good. It's very good. I feel like we might be getting somewhere, but we're really running short on time, unfortunately.
I don't need to have the last word.
Yeah. So I think we should wrap up because we're already 15 minutes over allotted time. So I'm going to have to say goodbye. Martin, would you like to? Martin's looking very disappointed that we're ending the discussion. So.
Not at all. I agree with Oren. It was a helpful, productive discussion.
Okay.
Well done, us.
Okay, good.
Well, you know what? I will say one thing. I think that where we are all on the same page is that the allocation of space in Hong Kong of road space, of street space, is way too skewed towards motor vehicles. I think on that we can all agree wholeheartedly.
I think that is an excellent point to end this conference on, which is rethinking vehicles first. So thank you, Oren. I couldn't have said it better. Okay, so thank you, everybody. And it's been a fantastic time. We were pressed for time the whole time. So I think if we do this again next time, we will probably have a less ambitious schedule and longer discussion, because that's where really the jewels are hiding. So thank you very much to all of our attendees and to our panelists for all of the sessions. And this will be available on YouTube Live, and we'll probably put an edited version up on Transit Jam as well, so people can take a look afterwards. There's been a ton of questions over the bike issue, which we don't have time to get into now, so we will try to keep the conversation going offline or online later on to do that. So that's it. Thanks from all of us here, and we hope to see you all soon. Thank you.